Hey fam, it's been a while again, at least a couple weeks I think. So it's the holiday season, so things are kind of catching up to me. But so to pick up where I left off, first I started talking about depression and change and complacency, and leading into complacency in relationships. Now I want to move on to something a little bit heavier. I want to talk about toxic relationships. Now, I don't want to just focus on relationships between like a significant other or a spouse, but also like family or friends or coworkers, boss even. So if you've never understood what a toxic relationship is like, and I'm sure most of you do know, it's where someone is basically finding a way to look innocent and blaming you for everything, causing you strife and stress, and making you feel horrible about yourself, and in reality they're just covering up their issues and their pain. And so a lot of people can call this kind of like narcissistic behavior, when you're faced with somebody who's toxic in your life. And so they're kind of like that emotional vampire. So that's what a lot of people say. It's kind of like that energy sucking vampire. So there's different forms of a toxic relationship, but the one that I want to talk about is the one that I've been faced with in my past. Now, to describe what I've been through, to shed you some light, is that I was in a relationship for 7 years. And this was after my marriage. That's a little bit different. It wasn't the healthiest of marriages, but I would say that the prime example of a toxic relationship is the relationship I was in for 7 years, and he was an alcoholic, and I put up with it. So usually what happens is when you are in a toxic relationship, especially when you are with a significant other, but you'll still do this with family members or a coworker or a boss or somebody, is that you want to give them the benefit of the doubt. You want to say, well, they made a mistake. They'll change. They'll get better. They'll realize what they're doing. It's really not that big of a deal. But when you're with an alcoholic, there's also that addiction aspect that goes along with it. And so that can actually create a lot of that narcissistic behavior of putting others down and making others feel bad to make themselves feel better about themselves. I know that sounded funny. But they have their tactics. They have their way with words. They can come off as very charming. They can definitely find ways to play games to get their way with you and with others. They can really put on a good facade. They have ways of lying. They have ways of trying to cover things up. And that's where you really start to question, well, am I in the wrong? Did I do something wrong? And you start to actually feel guilty. And it really does start to take a toll on you, because you're sitting here questioning them, you're questioning yourself, and you just find a way to accept it. And you want to, like I said, you want to try to give them the benefit of the doubt. You want to forgive them. You want to make excuses for them. That doesn't, she's chiming in, that doesn't really work, making excuses for them, of course, and defending them, a lot. And so this doesn't have to be in a relationship where somebody has an addiction, but it's a prime example, because I've known others, in my life, unfortunately, that have had an addiction that have the same narcissistic behaviors, and they dig a hole for themselves. They really, really do, because they tend to lie a lot, and they have to learn how to remember their lies and keep track of their lies and keep the story straight. And that can be very difficult, because after a while you're running out of lies to cover up your lies, and chances are eventually you're going to get caught. Well, what happens is once you start to feel that weight, so speaking from a toxic person's perspective, so to speak, they start to feel this weight, and they start to lash out in different ways, whether that be saying something or doing something totally illogical or inappropriate, blaming you for things that you know very well that you didn't do, isolate themselves, all kinds of stuff. So there's different things that they can do. And so the hard part is that when you get sucked into a situation where you start dating somebody and think, man, they're super cool, they're great, you are with them for quite a while, you think you know them, yet you see these things about them, but you don't really see them as red flags because you are kind of, I guess, blind to the situation because you care about them so much. And when you care about somebody so much, you tend to be blind to those issues, those red flags. And so that's where you tend to brush it off and you dismiss it as being a big issue. And it usually takes a big turn of events or something major to happen for you to actually realize. And even at that, sometimes, like, I'm sure that when it comes to, like, I've been emotionally abused, and thankfully I haven't, like, been physically or sexually abused by this person. However, the emotional abuse is just hard enough, and for the fact that I've put my son through it too, probably hurts me even more. But that was something that I could not hold against myself. I can't sit there and regret the fact that I put myself and my son in a situation for so long. But in retrospect, you look back and you're just like, I can't believe I did that. I can't believe I survived in that relationship for so long and let it go for so long, because now in retrospect, I'm like, oh yeah, like I'm connecting the dots and seeing what he was actually really up to. When you're in the moment, when you're there facing it, you don't see these things. You don't see things connected and figure out, what was really happening, down to, the specific events too that may even come back to you that you're just like, oh my God, I just realized that this happened. So this is what was happening. So it's a good lesson to be learned if you are able to come to the light and get yourself out of that toxic relationship. It's harder when it's family. It's hard to just, cut off that relationship with them. And so it's even harder to set boundaries. But when you are in a relationship with a significant other or a spouse, you can find that complacency. And so that's where that dismissal comes in. That's where you just kind of brush it off and say you'll deal with it and hopefully they'll change, right? And we know that doesn't work. We wait for them to change. We wait for them to see the light, and it doesn't happen. And so for me, it literally, for that situation, it took me 7 years. And for me to complain enough that my mom finally asked me, and just sit on the phone one day, and she goes, "Are you happy?" Now, mind you, my partner at the time did end up quitting drinking, all because of a situation that went down that he decided to change in that manner. And I was thankful for that. So I actually decided to give him another chance. However, what happened is that him quitting drinking really showed his imbalance emotionally, and that he couldn't handle stress very well. And so he was very uptight, very rash, just not fun to be around anymore, just very unenjoyable. no positivity coming out of him, nothing that felt united and loving for me or my son. And so, yeah, my mom had asked me, she's like, "Are you happy?" And at that moment, I'm like, "No, I'm not." And so it was right then and there where I'm like, I can't do this. I can't do this. And it was hard because I had my son. I was living up in Seattle, and I'm like, how can I afford to go somewhere else? That was a very, very difficult choice. So I did have to sacrifice a lot. I had to sacrifice my son moving in with his dad and living with roommates, which wasn't horrible. I'm just saying it was just not in the cards. It wasn't something I wanted to do. But I did it. And as soon as I told my partner and things were actually transitioning and happening, he became even worse. He started blaming me and accusing me of going and sleeping with other guys and all this kind of stuff and calling me names. It was really bad. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want this anymore. Like, my eyes were finally open and I got myself out of it. And even after that, it felt like there was still some residual toxicity that he wanted to bring on, and it was really difficult to shake, really difficult. It affected me, and this is where unfortunately I started to develop PTSD, is because I couldn't trust anybody. And I did not want to get into a relationship. I ended up meeting somebody where we agreed we don't want a relationship, but we ended up developing pretty quickly, and I was having trust issues. And it was really hard on him, and luckily he was the most patient, understanding person I had met in a long time, and he knew how to communicate, which is rare, and that has helped me. And now we've been in a relationship for almost 7 years, and we have our stumbles, but nothing compared to what it used to be, to where I felt uncomfortable with certain situations. So I have evolved, I have grown, and I have learned to accept that I know what a toxic relationship is. I know what a toxic person is. I know what narcissistic behavior is, because I've been faced with it and I've been blinded by it. And I've learned to see those signs in other people, and that helps me set boundaries with whoever that is in my life. And it may come off as being harsh or unaccepting to some people, but as soon as I detect those red flags in somebody, I'm going to call them out. Like, I don't put up with it anymore. So my message to you is that if you are in a toxic relationship, you may not even, I should say, you know it. You know deep down that somebody that you're around or somebody that you're with is not good for you. And do not let them tear you down. Do not let them make you feel like you are not worthy of a better life, or somebody better in your life, or what you deserve, right? So it's so important to stand your ground, to be who you need to be, and to separate yourself from them as much as possible. So if you're in a romantic relationship that is not healthy, get out of it, please. It is not worth another day to suck you dry. And to have somebody walk all over you is just not right. So be truthful with yourself. Be honest with yourself, Quit worrying about what they're going to say or think. Just do what you need to do for yourself. And especially if you have kids, please think about them. Like, this is carrying on to them and affecting them. So they do pick up on this, and it will affect them, unfortunately. And then, of course, if it's family find a way to set your boundaries and be strong with your boundaries. Like whatever that may be, as far as like when you interact with them, where you interact with them, how you interact with them, draw that line. It's so important. And if you have a boss that's toxic, if they treat you horribly, get out of that job. The pay and the benefits and the convenience are not worth it. They're not. You will feel relieved once you take that step away and realize that you made the right choice to get out of that toxic relationship. So please be honest with yourself. Take care of yourself and the loved ones that are being affected by this, because toxic people need to understand that they cannot keep doing this to people over and over again. So stand up for yourself. Take care of yourself. Love yourself, because you are worth it. Thank you.